What if Anakin and Obi Wan both burned on Mustafar? That's our story for today. Hope you guys enjoy, and let's get right into it. Our story begins on Mustafar, as Anakin Skywalker, now known as Darth Vader, is battling his former master across the lava river. Lightsabers striking against each other time and time again, as Skywalker and Kenobi fight to what both of them believe will be to death. As Anakin takes a swipe at Obi-Wan's legs, the Jedi Master saw a perfect opportunity to end this fight, and so Obi-Wan flipped backwards onto a rocky hill overlooking the river, as Anakin brought the platform to a stop, looking up at his old master. In desperation to end this, Obi-Wan yelled down that it was over. He has the high ground. Obi-Wan wasn't exactly sure what would happen next, but he could not keep going on this fight like this, and Anakin yelled up at Obi-Wan that he underestimates his power. Obi-Wan nearly begged him not to try it, but Anakin didn't listen. He flipped through the air, but this time, he put his lightsaber into his mechanical hand, and so as he tried to land behind Kenobi, Anakin had his legs cut through, along with his one good arm. But because Anakin put his lightsaber into the mechanical hand, as he fell hard to the ground, he took one final swing at Obi-Wan, cutting through his left arm and through both knees, causing both Skywalker and Kenobi to fall on the rocks and begin slipping down the hill. Both of them let out agonizing screams of pain and shock as the hot coals were searing through their robes and into their skin. Anakin's momentum caused him to slip further towards the lava, while Obi-Wan was able to put one remaining hand into the coals and stop his fall right above Anakin. The two of them laid here together for a moment, both of them in pain and in shock, until Obi-Wan turned his head just enough to see Anakin's entire body catch fire. It spread from his robes to his head, burning every part of him. The screams were haunting Obi-Wan as he tried to claw his way up the hill, but the sand and the coals were slipping through his hand, which was losing feeling as it was being burned away. Anakin's screams soon switched to low groans, and soon, nothing, and Obi-Wan could only assume that he had died. Luckily, because he didn't fall as far as Anakin, the fire had not consumed him. His robes were charred, his legs and one arm were missing, and his other hand was basically losing all feeling as he dug into the hot sand time and time again, trying to climb his way up. Through sheer determination, Obi-Wan continued to claw his way up, and soon he saw the shuttle of the Emperor fly over his head. Obi-Wan wanted to give up. He'd lost everything, and everyone he'd ever loved. And in the end, maybe he was meant to die here with his students. A long time passed, with Obi-Wan basically unconscious. He didn't know how long it was, but eventually, a voice from beyond the galaxy spoke to Obi-Wan, urging him to keep climbing. The voice sounded like Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan didn't know if he was having a vision, if he was dreaming, or if he was just going insane. But Obi-Wan listened to the voice, and he climbed and climbed some more, until finally, on his last bit of strength, he reached the top of the hill, pulling himself over the edge, falling a bit into a small, hidden cavern under the coals. And moments later, Obi-Wan heard Darth Sidious and a squad of clone troopers arrive. Sidious surprisingly remarked that Anakin was still alive, and they need a medical capsule immediately. And this put Obi-Wan over the edge, overwhelming his mind so much that he now finally let go. Anakin survived, despite everything, and everything went dark for Obi-Wan. Days later, inside of a Bacta tank on Polis Massa, Obi-Wan Kenobi opened his eyes. He was alive, and his body was being suspended in the air by some sort of machine. Obi-Wan was lifted out of the tank, and he saw Yoda with Bail Organa. Yoda gave a smile that showed no sign of actual happiness, more so just a bit of relief, and Obi-Wan came to realize he was not nearly the same person before the injuries on Mustafar. His body was lifted out of the Bacta tank, and he fell in and out of consciousness. A group of medical droids began putting a suit around Obi-Wan. Over the course of many hours, Obi-Wan's legs were replaced with Durasteel limbs. Both of his arms were replaced as well, as even the good one was burned to uselessness, and as Obi-Wan looked around, he realized he was not wearing some regular healing mask. No, this was now his life. Obi-Wan's lungs were severely burned, and he now had breathing tubes going from his lungs out of his nose that automatically breathed for him, as doing it manually brought great pain. He had to wear a breathing respirator with it that covered his mouth, nose, and throat, and this would affect his voice, forcing it to come out in a slower, deeper tone, with hints of it sounding like a droid. He was lifted by these droids to the floor, and both Yoda and Bail looked on in sadness. From feet to throat, Obi-Wan was forever encased in this suit of Durasteel that would greatly limit him. Yoda recalled the night all of it happened. He lost to Sidious, and he found Bail. In meditation that night, Qui-Gon came to him and told Yoda where to find Obi-Wan. So Yoda, Bail, and his aides went to Mustafar with a medical capsule, found Obi-Wan, brought him to Polis Massa, and Bail poured a massive amount of funds into having a repair system quickly built. And now, they were here. Obi-Wan looked from his legs to his arms, all of his movements a bit delayed as his brain was transmitting signals to limbs that weren't actually his. And Obi-Wan was able to joke that he always wanted to kill Grievous, not become him. Yoda shook his head, secretly happy that Obi-Wan's sense of humor didn't fully burn away on Mustafar. And Obi-Wan would only wonder where Anakin was now. He remembered Sidious saying that Anakin was still alive, and Obi-Wan could only wonder what situation Anakin was currently in. But then another thought hit Obi-Wan. He asked Yoda, "Where is Padme? Is she safe? Is she alright?" And Yoda said she was missing from Mustafar, so they can only assume the Sith have Padme and the children. And once more, Obi-Wan thought about Anakin, wondering if he was finally happy with his family. But Anakin Skywalker was no more. All that remained was Vader, encased in a horribly designed broken suit. Walking was horrible, breathing was loud and painful, seeing, hearing, touching, and smelling were reduced to that of a droid, and the suit dug into him painfully. With each movement or step that he took, his suit was beeping, lighting up for seemingly no reason. He no longer slept without being awoken by his own breathing or never-ending nightmares. He was in a constant state of solitary confinement, a prison of the worst sort, continual torture. This was not living. But worst of all, Sidious informed him that Padme and his children died on Mustafar. It was all for nothing, and he was now just a minion to serve Sidious. Whatever was left of Anakin Skywalker was fading more and more by the day. But something Vader couldn't quite remember was the fate of Obi-Wan Kenobi. When Anakin went in and out of consciousness while burning on Mustafar, he knew Obi-Wan was once next to him. But when Sidious arrived and Vader was able to look around through his burned, nearly blinded eyes, he didn't see Obi-Wan anywhere. Part of him thought Obi-Wan just fell into the lava, but another part of him wondered if somehow Obi-Wan survived. So today he thought about his old master, wondering if somehow they shared a similar fate, forever confined to these suits of armor. And Darth Sidious was the winner of all of it. The Jedi were dead, the Chosen One now lived only to serve him, with no chance of overthrowing him, and he was now building the empire he prepared decades for. And to top it all off, he had the twin children of Anakin Skywalker, being kept in the Limerge building deep in Coruscant. They were being raised by nursing droids, and in time, they would be trained as Sith. Whichever one of them was stronger would be his true eventual apprentice. Everything was perfect for Sidious to rule, and for months, the Empire would indeed establish itself in the galaxy. Government bodies were renamed to reflect change in authority, statues of Emperor Palpatine were built, the Grand Army of the Republic became the Imperial military, setting out into the unconquered portions of the galaxy to show how strong the Empire was. Separatist holdouts were raided and taken down, Republic rebels were dealt with, and citizens were required to have chain codes so the Empire could keep track of the people. Overall, citizens were pleased to have the bloodshed of the war come to an end, but it wouldn't take long for most people to see that Imperial control was not at all what they wanted. During these months, Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi would spend most of their time training, learning how to move in their suits, how to walk, run, jump with their new legs, how to hold a lightsaber in their new arms, how to swing the blade around, how to use the Force. For both of them, it was like starting again as a youngling, except in broken, burned bodies, and neither of them knew the other one was alive. During all of these days, as Obi-Wan trained on Polis Massa while Yoda watched on, Obi-Wan couldn't shake the feeling that Padme was still alive on Mustafar when she fell, and the more he thought about it, the more it made sense that Vader would not know this. Why would Sidious tell Vader anything? Obi-Wan and Yoda both concluded that Sidious would likely take the children to secretly be his next apprentice, punishing Anakin for his failures. And if they were right, then there was still a way to destroy the Sith. So after months of training, Obi-Wan thought he was finally ready to re-enter into the galaxy. During all of this, Bail Organa had hired bounty hunters and spies to track the Emperor's shuttle with extreme discretion, eventually finding that his most common traveled place on Coruscant was the Limerge building. And so, a plan would be enacted to get Obi-Wan on Coruscant, placed deep in the industrial sector, and his mission would begin to try and find out if he and Yoda were correct. For hours, Obi-Wan moved through old scrap, pipes, and other industrial equipment until he came to the Limerge building. Obi-Wan cut the power inside, shutting down all communication secretly before entering in through a lower door. His mechanical limbs groaned faintly with each step. The suit was both a blessing and a curse. It granted him strength and mobility, compensating for his injuries sustained in the past, and yet the armor also restrained his natural agility and fluidity. It felt unnatural to him, a Jedi Master so accustomed to precise, graceful movement. And as the doors slid open, he stepped into the dimly lit corridor of the first level. 5 stormtroopers stood waiting, resting casually until they saw Kenobi, and all suddenly raised their blasters. Without hesitation, Obi-Wan activated his lightsaber, the familiar hum of its blue blade, accompanied by the whirring of mechanical joints. The first round of blaster fire ricocheted harmlessly off his saber, and he charged forward, propelled by the immense power of the armor. With a single stroke, he cut through 2 of the troopers, then punched a third one with easy power. And yet, as he moved to engage the remaining soldiers, Obi-Wan felt the armor's resistance, its bulk hindering his footwork. He compensated with raw power, slashing through the final troopers, but a part of him did yearn for the elegance that he once had. He continued up the building, and on the second level, the challenge would intensify. 5 troopers armed with electrostaffs were awaiting him. Obi-Wan instinctively tried to take a calming breath, but he didn't breathe on his own anymore. So he calmed himself with the Force, and as the first trooper lunged, Obi-Wan dodged, cutting him down, but 2 more slammed their staffs down on Obi-Wan's saber. His body, still healing from old burns, forever healing from old burns, ached under the strain, but he was able to spin backwards, cutting down both of them as they stumbled forward. The next attack came in fast, but Obi-Wan used the armor's immense strength to his advantage. He pushed forward with a forceful swing, easily cutting down 1 trooper before using a force push to send the final one through the metal walls and down to the ground below. Obi-Wan continued up to the 3rd level of the building, ready for anything. And the 3rd level greeted him with an eerie stillness, but Obi-Wan knew the silence was a trick, and suddenly, 3 Inquisitors, the red-bladed lightsabers igniting in unison, stood waiting. Obi-Wan moved towards them, but this time, he was much more measured. The Inquisitors were skilled, and though the armor provided strength, it could not substitute for the sharpness of mind and reflexes honed by these people over decades. A woman called out, asking who he was, but Obi-Wan didn't respond to her, instead running at the Inquisitors, igniting his blade. The first one struck. Obi-Wan parried a few strikes before taking the offensive. He pulled pipes from the ceiling to knock the other 2 down, then swung at the 3rd Inquisitor with power. Obi-Wan's body, shielded by the armor, felt distant from the fight, as though the suit was battling as much as he was. Luckily, these Inquisitors were no real match for his skill. The first one overplayed her hand, allowing Obi-Wan to stab through her chest. The remaining 2 moved in unison, attacks coordinated, and Obi-Wan's suit allowed him to withstand blows that would have otherwise crippled him, but the weight of each movement slowed his counters. He used the Force to compensate, hurling 1 Inquisitor back while dueling the other, but each clash drained him even more. The suit amplified his strength, yet dulled his connection to the Force, as though the machinery stood between him and the energy that once flowed through him. But with a final surge, he overpowered the other Inquisitor with his lightsaber, cutting through the red blade before delivering a killing blow. The final one leapt at him, but Obi-Wan caught the Inquisitor in the air with the Force, pulled his red lightsaber into his own hand, and stabbed both blades into the masked man. The fight was over, and Obi-Wan opened a door to find medical droids watching over 2 twin infants, and in the corner with the children was a frail, handcuffed, sad woman. Sidious was keeping Padme alive in order for the children to develop some sort of human connection and normal development, but Padme was in rough shape. She looked to the door now, saw the armored man, but luckily the top half of Obi-Wan's face was visible. Padme hadn't felt happiness like this in forever. Obi-Wan ran in, cutting away her restraints, along with destroying the medical droids, and Padme hugged him before running to her children, picking them up, and Obi-Wan signaled that he was ready for pickup, allowing Bail Organa to fly his ship to the hangar. As Obi-Wan, Padme, and the twins escaped together, as Obi-Wan told Padme everything that happened on Mustafar until today. Both of them were convinced that Anakin was alive in the galaxy somewhere. They would all regroup on Polis Massa with Yoda, and Obi-Wan would have his suit repaired with new limbs. His first mission in the suit was a success, and Bail Organa would hire more spies to gather any and all information on anyone called Darth Vader, to determine first if he still exists, and second where he may be going. Weeks would go by with nothing. Both Padme and Obi-Wan began to wonder if Anakin simply died while trying to be repaired. That seemed like the most logical possibility, especially considering that Obi-Wan barely survived. But when all hope seemed lost, news came in from one of the spies in the Empire. They were getting overconfident, and a leak came in that a man called Vader was traveling to Kashyyyk to kill rogue Jedi and begin the enslavement of Wookiees for a secret project known as Stardust. And so, Obi-Wan and the group prepped themselves to travel to the Wookiee planet. On Kashyyyk, Darth Vader was leading an assault on the planet with his troopers, and the Wookiees were putting up a surprisingly strong fight. Vader was in the city Kachiro, mercilessly cutting down Wookiees, waiting for the Jedi to reveal themselves, and before long, Vader found a camp where Wookiee children were hiding out. Vader was about to continue his assault, when a sudden force push slammed Vader off of a ledge and far down to the forest floor. Vader groaned as he slowly stood up, then looked on as an armored man landed right in front of him. It was Kenobi. Vader angrily reignited his red blade, looking Obi-Wan up and down, angry that Obi-Wan's suit was clearly far superior to his, and he moved towards Kenobi. The Empire's bombardment rained down in the distance, lighting up the skies with fiery explosions. The ground trembled with each hit, but Obi-Wan's focus was on the twisted figure of his former apprentice. Both of them in suits they barely controlled, mechanical armor grinding, struggling to keep up with the ferocity of this sudden duel. Obi-Wan's sudden strikes were raw and heavy, lacking the finesse he once yielded, while Vader's attacks were just brutal, his towering frame helping make up for his lost abilities. "You can't win, Anakin," Obi-Wan said between clashes, his lightsaber parrying a heavy strike from Vader. "This armor, this thing you've become, it's not power, it's a prison," he told him. Vader's red blade slashed wildly, sparks flying as it connected with a nearby tree, splitting the massive trunk into two, and Vader yelled that he was beyond any Jedi. His voice was distorted by the respirator, just like Kenobi's, each breath harsh and mechanical, filled with anger and fury. His swings were strong, but unrefined, driven by rage rather than actual precision. And Obi-Wan, though struggling, used his own experience to sidestep Vader's over-aggressive attacks, waiting for the opportunity to strike back. They fought their way through the dense jungle, each exchange more desperate, as the environment was ripped apart around them. Obi-Wan moved with a hidden purpose, leading Vader deeper into the forest, and with a powerful force push, Vader sent Kenobi flying backwards, and he barely dodged a new attack, as Vader was throwing parts of a torn-down tree at him. Obi-Wan flipped backwards into an open clearing, away from the main battle, and Vader followed. As they emerged into the open, the roar of Imperial bombers overhead seemed to quiet for a moment. Vader followed, ready to strike, but he froze as his gaze fell upon the figures standing in the center of the clearing, Padme, holding Luke and Leia. Padme called out Anakin's name, and her voice broke any tension. Her eyes were wide with disbelief, locked on to Anakin in this new set of armor. Vader hesitated, his lightsaber lowering slightly. The conflict within him was strong, the dark side warring with the remnants of the man that he'd once been. For a fleeting moment, the mask of Vader faltered, but then with a roar of anguish he raised his blade again, though the new strike never came. Obi-Wan stepped between them, his own lightsaber ignited, but now his posture was defensive, his voice was calm, as he told Anakin this was his choice, urging Anakin to choose them or lose everything again. And Padme would tell Vader how the Emperor kept them prisoner for months. This diverted Vader's anger away from Obi-Wan and directly to Sidious and his empire. Vader got down on one knee, removing his helmet for a moment, allowing him to look at his children with his own eyes, then back up to Padme. She was clearly afraid of him, rightfully so, and Vader looked up to the skies. His Star Destroyer and Tarkin's Star Destroyer were firing down on the planet, and so Vader asked Obi-Wan to come with him. Obi-Wan nodded, and Vader said goodbye to Padme and the children, saying he hopes they will survive and thrive in a truly peaceful galaxy very soon. Vader and Kenobi would take Vader's shuttle to the sky, boarding Vader's Star Destroyer, moving up to the bridge. The two of them didn't speak to each other much. There was a mutual understanding here that their longtime friendship was gone, but they can honor the memories of Skywalker and Kenobi by ending all of this today. Vader and Obi-Wan used mind tricks on the clones in the bridge, ordering them to direct all firepower at Tarkin's Star Destroyer. And within a minute, Tarkin and his destroyer were completely obliterated, and Kashyyyk was freed to take on the Imperial forces on their planet, freeing themselves, fighting back against the Empire. And together, Vader and Obi-Wan would jump to hyperspace as Vader contacted Darth Sidious, telling him the Wookiees have put up an unexpected amount of resistance, and they may need reinforcements. Sidious angrily responded that he's too busy to deal with Vader's failures, and he asked Vader if he'd been to the industrial sector recently. Sidious personally went to check out the Limerge building today, as none of the guards or inquisitors had checked in during the past few weeks. Sidious made it a priority to check in on the twins only around once a month, as they were of no use to him yet, more so a waste of time right now. But he realized now they've been gone for weeks. He'd been too busy building an empire to realize any of it. And this was exactly what Vader and Kenobi were hoping for. Sidious, alone, away from civilization. And so when Vader's Star Destroyer emerged from hyperspace, Sidious immediately knew what this meant. He ordered the Imperial blockade to fire everything it had at the destroyer, but Vader put all of the ship's power toward the shields and engines. The destroyer was being ripped and torn apart, but it didn't matter. Obi Wan used mind tricks to influence the troopers on board, and he had it aimed directly for the Limerge building. The fiery, exploding ship soon entered the atmosphere. Vader was defending the door from troopers trying to stop this, and soon, the final mission of Skywalker and Kenobi was a success. Sidious tried using the Force to redirect the ship, pouring dark energy and lightning into it, but it was no use. The destroyer crashed into the building, completely exploding and killing Sidious, Vader, and Kenobi in one swift movement as the explosion rocked the entire sector. The crash of the Star Destroyer into Coruscant's industrial sector sent shockwaves through the planet's core, both literally and politically. The loss of the Emperor was not just the death of Sidious, it was the collapse of the dark web he'd spun to maintain power. Without his dark influence guiding the Senate and manipulating the military, the cohesion of the Empire began to quickly unravel. The destruction of key data centers and communication nodes within the industrial sector shut down critical lines of control, leaving the Empire paralyzed. The failure on Kashyyyk was also notable, as people heard about this around the galaxy, and across the galaxy the Imperial military was faltering. Many of the officers, who'd been ruled by fear or manipulation, found themselves without clear leadership. With Coruscant in disarray, orders stopped flowing, fleet movements ground to a halt, and many planets, especially those on the fringes of the Empire, saw the opportunity to rise against their oppressors. Governors and Moffs, now without direct oversight, either turned to infighting or sought ways to retain power for themselves, further weakening the central authority. The Senate dissolved into chaos as Imperial loyalists clashed with those secretly sympathetic to rebellion. Essential functions like trade, resource distribution, planetary defense began to collapse as Imperial infrastructure crumbled without control. In the years that followed, a grassroots rebellion surged across the galaxy. What started as small cells of resistance soon coalesced into a larger movement, fueled by the help of Padme Amidala, who was still alive, working quietly in the system, seizing her moment. She was a beacon of hope for this rebellion, and the restoration of the Republic that would soon come. 5 years after the fall of the Emperor, the remnants of the Empire were either absorbed into the rebellion or collapsed entirely. Coruscant, that was once the jewel of the galaxy, was liberated after months of brutal fighting, and with the Imperial regime shattered, Padme Amidala was elected as Chancellor of the new Republic. Luke and Leia were set to be leaders of a new Jedi Order in the coming years, as they were beacons of light in a rebuilding Jedi Order under Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Cal Kestis, among others, as Yoda watched from the Resistance. The new Republic and the new Jedi Order rose from the ashes, guided by the new ideals, and from the sacrifice of Skywalker and Kenobi. And folks, that is our story for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was a path I kind of fought over for a long time of what I wanted to do. There's just a lot of different things in this scenario with both Anakin and Obi Wan losing on Mustafar. One of them can die, one of them can become Vader. They can both escape with Yoda's help or something. I don't know. I decided to ultimately go as a sort of like Darth Vader, just in the light and in the dark, and have them ultimately fight each other, with Padme, Luke, and Leia surviving, with Sidious just keeping them alive and not telling Vader, which would be motivation for Vader to turn against him. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I certainly did. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.